Welcome. My name is Dr. Roger Narlock, and I serve as the director of the Benedictine Institute at St. John's. And I would like to welcome you all to our last Lunch and Learn of the semester. As the regulars among you know, Benedictine Institute Lunch and Learns focus on some aspect of the Benedictine heritage of St. John's and St. Ben's, or the Benedictine values that are at the heart of our campus communities. Today's topic merges both that heritage and those values by providing some history about the Abbey Arboretum, as well as highlighting some of the values that help us to understand why and how an undertaking like an arboretum makes so much sense within a Benedictine community. Today's topic is a little different than most, though, and I will admit a topic very personal to me, because today is also a tribute to Father Paul Schweitz. Father Paul Schweitz was a monk of St. John's Abbey who died on May 4th in the year 2000 at the age of 47. In fact, this talk was originally planned for 2 years ago at the 20th anniversary of his passing. But of course, because of the pandemic, we've now delayed it to about the 22nd anniversary of his passing. You will hear a lot about Father Paul during this talk, as he was the primary mover behind the formation of the Arboretum here at St. John's. But like all monastics and all people, he was more than just his role or his accomplishments. He was a wonderful person. One who had a big impact on my life in ways that had nothing to do with the Arboretum. I had the good fortune as a sophomore undergraduate here being in one of the dorms across the tundra with Father Paul as my FR. Got to know him very well, became his RA on his floor for the next year, and we became closer and very good friends, to the point where he even officiated my wedding. I don't know who that guy is in front, but Father Paul's the guy in the back. So a little bit more about my journey back here. I began here as a faculty member in the fall of 2000. And if you remember the date of Father Paul's passing, the last time I saw him was when I interviewed here for this position in the spring of 2000, and talked to him during that time, and I remember our last words were like, well, it'll be so great if I got the job here and we'd be able to reconnect and see each other on a regular basis. And it was just a couple of months after that I got the word of his passing, and we were never able to rekindle that kind of strong relationship that we had. So I am honored to be part of his tribute and living out his legacy, more focused on the Arboretum. But again, always keep in mind that we are more than just our role and our accomplishments, and certainly that is the case for Father Paul, such a wonderful person. I will now turn to introducing our speakers for today. Let me go back past that. First, we have two speakers with us who will tag team the presentation. First, we have, of course, former chemistry professor and 22-year abbot of St. John's Monastery, who needs no more introduction than that, Abbot John Klassen. And then we also have former St. John's University chemistry major, and with also a master's degrees in environmental studies and also in forestry, and since 2017 has devoted himself to his dream job as St. John's Abbey land manager and director of Outdoor University, John Geissler. And I will also add to his introduction and his title, my brother-in-law, for those of you who don't know. He will be very pleased to know that I refrained from also finding a picture of 15-year-old John Geissler at our wedding and putting it up there. So if you could join me in welcoming Abbot John and John Geissler.
Hey, thank you so much for being here. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be with you. How many are you grew up on a farm? Okay, wow, I'm surprised. That's a lot. That's a lot. So what I'm going to say really here is devoted to, if you will, the first segment of the history of St. John's and the way in which it started, and fundamentally, this absolutely fundamental transformation that occurred in the 1970s and through the present time. Okay? I think do I do that? Yep. Like that. Okay. A view of the vast forest and just a whole lot of trees in their full glory. Huh? So Boniface Swimmer, I'm really dialing back to the middle of the 19th century. Boniface Swimmer was the diocesan priest who became a monk of Metten Abbey and had a burning desire to become a missionary monk to the United States to serve German immigrants. Of course, he broadened that out, realized, hey, maybe there's a lot of other immigrants too. But he founded St. Vincent Abbey in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, came to this country in 1846. From the get-go, always had a vision for a monastery, had to have enough land so that it could be self-sustaining, so that it could have, a dairy herd and other resources, forest, and just the kind of things that are part of the overall monastery environment, so that the community itself can really sustain itself. And that was true at St. Vincent in Latrobe. And when the monks, 5 monks came to this area of the country in 1856, they landed alongside the Mississippi in St. Cloud and were back and forth between there, Shakopee, St. Joe, back again to the Mississippi, and ultimately in 1865 came to this site. You can see right here, looking in this hallway here, that in fact these bricks that we're looking at, we don't have to look at the slide, we can just look at the wall. Huge brickworks here when this quadrangle was built, right where the Science Hall Auditorium is. Coleman Berry will say in Worship and Work that in the days in which those bricks were being formed here, it was about the only time in the first 100 years of this place that the campus was well lit at night, simply because it took that kind of effort. The other place, of course, was adjacent to where the Abbey and Parish Cemetery is at the present. That's where there was another huge brickyard. But you can imagine, until Bennett Hall was built, all of the bricks, I think, were built or were made and formed here on this campus, okay? And while some of these timbers would have certainly come from the wood that's on this land, those bigger beams there, as well as the cast iron posts, would have been purchased, okay? But you get a sense for, and here you see in the early days, all the way up through the 1890s, when coal began to become important for the heating of the quadrangle. In fact, the woods themselves provided the wood for the heating of the quadrangle. And you can see on the next slide here, this huge, beautiful barn, huh? So it would be important for me to say that in the first 100 years, this was a mission monastery. The majority of monks were not living here. They were out in parishes all the way out to Dakota, all the way up to Duluth, all the way into Minneapolis, and two rather large parishes in New York. And in the 1940s and 50s, in new monastic foundations. The campus community here was relatively stable and, most importantly, small. So that, in fact, the dairy farm that was here, those animals living in that barn and the cow yard around it fundamentally provided most of the food for the campus. Now, I would be absolutely, the building might fall on me if I said that we did it all. Because, in fact, you can never, there are always things you gotta buy. For example, you're not gonna grow enough potatoes on this land for any sizable community at all. But there were cows, dairy herd. At the time that herd was sold in 1958, there would have been 60 to 65 registered Holstein dairy cows, which at that time, that was a big herd of cows. There was a hog farm, there was a chicken yard and a chicken business as well. So all of it was a stable ecosystem. Coming out of World War II and into the 1950s, what happens? Well, I mean, across the country, campuses like this are beginning to grow their schools. And as soon as that happens, well, two things happen. One is suddenly you have a lot more people to feed. If you're gonna have a dairy operation and a farm operation that's gonna provide enough food for this many people, all of a sudden you have to either get bigger or get out. And the community had to make a very painful, but standing in this place, obvious decision to get out. Okay? To just cease. Hard decision at the time. Now seems absolutely obvious. The second is, if you're going to have a campus here, you ultimately can't, I mean, I love farming. I grew up on a farm. You can't have a cow yard in the middle of the campus. You just can't. It just ultimately will not win the day. Okay? So this barn closed in 1958. It was immediately used for the construction of the glass windows, the stained glass windows in the north wall of the Abbey Church. And then it was taken down.
Excuse me, Abbot John?
Yes, please.
What was the location of that?
Of this barn?
Yeah.
It was right parallel to the long wing of Tommy Hall, probably about 125 feet to the north. Okay? Yeah. So we're talking, it's right there. Furthermore, all of the lands coming in, so at that time, the entrance road into the campus was the main one, was coming right off of Highway 52 and past the prep school. County Road 159, it was an afterthought. Who would drive there? You know, so it was coming in, winding through the woods, and driving up and seeing the Twin Towers before the Breuer Church was built, etc. The monks had to drain the land where the wetlands are, drain that land, and all of the land was tilled. There were big gardens adjacent to the Gemini Lake, and the East Gemini Lake wasn't a lake at that point. It's an artificial lake as a receiver now for the wastewater treatment plant. So a lot of those things were put in place in the 60s when the campus was being transformed. So when the freeway transforms 52 into I-94, this entrance is closed. That becomes, County Road 159 becomes the major entrance. And at that point, in fact, all of that land that's there to the east side or east and south side of the road, in fact, it's obvious, like, wow, What should we do with that? In the 70s itself, and I was in the community in this time, so the community itself was already beginning to think of how do we use this incredible resource to become a much more integrated part of the educational and life of the campus itself. How do we make that work? What will it take? How to pull it off? Who would drive it? Okay? How do you even begin to think about it? And fortunately for us, one of those incredible gifts that happens in a monastic community sometimes, and with of course, the support and energy and smarts of just a whole lot of people working with Father Paul. An SJU graduate in biology, emphasis in botany, and Jerome Tyson, Abbot Jerome, in the when Paul came in, just really said, why don't you think about forest and land management? Why don't you think about that and what might be possible? So after ordination, Paul went to the U of M to earn a degree in forest and land management, and he returned home. From the get-go, I remember this well. From the get-go, when you come home and you know what you're going to do, what you're trying to do, he had developed, if you will, the kind of strategic plan in his own mind for what had to happen, okay? In terms of the transformation. I'm going to stop and get out of John's way.
All right. Thank you, Abbot John. Oh, is that too loud? So just to kind of give you this is what Abbot John was talking about. This is a 1965 aerial photo. So this is where 94 is now. This was where the footbridge is currently. This was the main entrance into campus. And up here, this is where 159 comes into campus. You can see the Gemini Lakes are not there yet. The wetlands were ditched here, and these were all agricultural fields up top. I think I'm just going to go to the... So Father Paul came up with this vision to celebrate these native habitats that are here. And I'll just tell you a quick story. This is kind of how I got hooked in this arena. I was a timid freshman, my first year on the job, and we had a prescribed burn that day. And Father Paul handed me the drip torch, and I said, well, what do I do? He said, just don't look back. And I had this blaze just behind me, and I remember him specifically on the top of the hill cheering. He was yelling, and I was hooked. In fact, after this presentation, we're doing another burn, so it just keeps going. But Father Paul was really, this place is unique for many reasons, but this is just ecologically, we are at the meeting place of the prairies of the West. So from the Rockies to here, this is where kind of the edge of the prairie ecosystem. We have the conifers of the North extending all the way to the Arctic. And we have the deciduous woods, which is shown in green here, extending all the way to the East Coast. And this is the one spot where in a 1.5 mile loop, you can get prairie, oak savanna, deciduous forest, conifers, wetlands, lakes in one loop. It's the most biodiverse, I'm going to make the claim, it's the most biodiverse loop in Minnesota. And it's outstanding. So for a living laboratory that celebrates native ecosystems, this is the place to have that. So just kind of giving you I'm just going to focus on 160 acres. We have 2,944 acres within the Abbey Arboretum, and a lot happens. But I want to this was a key part of kind of the formation of the Arboretum. And it was the restoration of the wetlands is what Father Paul began with. So what he did was this wetland that had been ditched for agriculture, you put a dam in close to 94 and a control structure where you could raise and lower water levels. And right after that water was back in place, native plants started coming back. So you can see some Joe Pye weed, ironweed, sedges, all sorts of different plants. I'm not going to bore you with all the names right now, But then when the plants come back, then the wildlife comes back. Snapping turtle, otters, chorus frogs, and the swans are a big success story. They were almost extinct in Minnesota, and now it's not uncommon. Like just yesterday, I saw two setting up a nest in the wetlands. So, and this winter. They're even hanging out all winter. This is a negative 20-degree day. There was a little open water there, and there was 30 of them sitting in that wetland. Just beautiful. The next phase, so that was 88 that the restored wetlands went in. 91, Father Paul turned his attention to restoring the prairie. And it had been pretty much flattened, and it was too flat in his eyes. So I remember him telling the story of dropping off all these loads of dirt to make some contour to the land. And the bulldozer driver asked him, well, what do you want me to do here? He said, just do it how God would do it. So he kind of formed it out. So it's kind of a neat. And then here's just on the dedication of the prairie, Father Paul is very good at bringing together people and getting people excited about this project. This is the prairie. So prairies are fire-dependent systems. They need fire to kind of regenerate, keep out woody plants, and keep non-native exotics that tend to take over just suppressed. So this is beautiful. It takes a little time to gain appreciation for a prairie, but there's 300 different kinds of plants in that. It might just look like grass to you, but it blooms all throughout the year. We had students in the beginning kind of chart the return of insects, chart the return of butterflies. And I would like to point out Annie Kaluza. She funded a lot of that early research by students, her and her family. So I want to really thank people like her for believing in this dream. Oak Savannah Restoration, this was phase 3. This is when I started here as a student. We were starting to work on this, so we're cutting out, this was cow pasture at one time, so it had the big bur oak trees, but it had, all the understory had been eaten away. So we were clearing a lot of brush and then replanting that kind of ground layer of prairie underneath those big oaks. And again, this is a fire-dependent system, so lots of fire going through. And then you can see just a few weeks after a fire how those plants respond. And then, so I started here in 95 and then graduated in 99. So I knew Father Paul just as this dedication of the Arboretum happened in 97. So I got to see kind of that key formation piece. And I was a chemistry major. I never thought I could make a living doing this work. But Father Paul convinced me to come back. But just 2 months after I started back, he passed away. So we had a big rally of people, supporters to keep this dream alive. And we built the boardwalks, was his next phase in this dream. So we did that as kind of a memorial to Paul. And that really launched our educational system. So in kind of concert with restoring the land, we wanted to have this used as a living lab so people get connected to the environment and want to take care of it. So now it's grown to thousands of pre-K-12 students come out on field trips from the district, from area schools. We do a lot with our own St. Ben's and St. John's students. Thousands of interactions throughout the year, and really during COVID, this was one safe activity to do, so we were really upped our service to the St. Ben's and St. John's community. And then we do community, like landowner trainings, master naturalist trainings for the community to get them involved and being wise stewards of their own land. And then just providing opportunities for outdoor recreation and spiritual renewal. So we have a luminary hike where we light up out to the chapel. You'll have to check that out some year. Canoeing, skiing, all those kind of just wonderful opportunities to refresh and recharge outside. And this note, I always like, I'm going to wrap it up here, Jen, and then you can kind of give the final words. this was a note that I found in Father Paul's office, keep it alive and growing. So I cut that out and I put that on my chalkboard. And these are just some of the upcoming events we have coming up. Saturday, we're going to do a big tree planting. 1,600 oak seedlings are going to go in the ground. And it's good if it's raining because the trees get watered right away. It's when, and then we have spring birding days, paddle making workshops, master naturalist classes. We have camps for kids. So do check out the Outdoor U website. And every Wednesday we have Abbey Conservation Corps, which basically we do a different project outside if you want to come and join us for that. So I'm going to turn it over to Abbot John for just some final words here. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, John. Thanks so much. So just a few words about the kind of spiritual sense that's underneath this kind of commitment, and it's within the monastic community, but it's also part of the campus culture, part of who we all are together. I mean, I think the kind of energy that's behind this and awareness emerges from a rich biblical sense of that the earth and all that it holds belongs to God ultimately, and that we are here for a while, and that we hand things on to the next generation. And what we want to do is of course, to hand it on at least as good, if not better, than what we ourselves received. And for Benedictines, of course, that the foundation for that is the commitment to stability, and that is that sense of being part of a community. That no matter where you go as a monk of this monastery, this is home. But there's also it bleeds over into the sense of the place we're in, and a sense of place, and how important that place is in forming us and shaping us, and being shaped by us. Secondly, I think humility is chapter 7 in the rule is the, if you will, the pinnacle of the teaching of the rule. Tough chapter, but it's worth going to. Okay, so when you look at the causeway across the Watab there, okay, mistake, huh? Big mistake. I think it seemed like a good idea, but when the fill was put in, it was supposed to be a causeway across there, but what it did was it just kept sinking and made everything else come up, and it changed the whole ecosystem of the Watab. So I was thinking about this with Brother Linus when he was still with us. Would it be possible to dredge that out and open the Watab up again? So we checked it out with DNR, and they said, sit down until the idea goes away. Okay. It has reestablished its own ecosystem, and it's just fine. If you disturb that ecosystem now, you will again make it worse again. Okay? So part of being humble is being a learner and recognizing a mistake when it's been made. The Psalms that we pray every day as a community are filled with references to the gift of creation. And, we don't spend a lot of time as we're praying those Psalms thinking about that, and because, ultimately you got to keep up with the flow. But it's something that starts to penetrate our bones, and I hope it shows in who we are. Stability also means when you're faced with a tough ecological challenge like oak regeneration, you wouldn't believe how hard it is to re-jumpstart an oak forest. It's really hard, especially with deer who like to eat seedlings for breakfast. It's like bacon. But being committed to stability, and you figure it out and you make the commitment to keep doing it, because ultimately the next generation's going to need those trees. And finally, I hope that all of us have a sense of the trustworthiness and the bounty and goodness of the earth. As the Psalms and Scriptures say, oil, bread, wine, plants, milk, honey, and countless other things that come to us. That the earth is durable and solid, like God's promises. And it's that kind of spiritual sense, I think, that energizes and gives depth to the work of the Arboretum and the work of the Outdoor University. And it's certainly something we would try to be communicating to you as well as to all of our student learners. Father Paul was a teacher, huh? Any of you who just, if you knew him, if you're walking through the woods, it wasn't heavy didacticism, but he would just be pointing things out, just that kind of very casual and sharpening eyes for what's going on. And I think that's the kind of learning that you and I can do every day. Huh? Hey, thank you so much. God bless.
We have a fair amount of time actually for questions. So if John and John would gladly come back up here, I'll just have them invite the questions.
I have a burning question. I've heard through rumor, and I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that the state of Minnesota took some of St. John's land when the freeway came through. Is that true? And I'm just wondering, how does the community feel about that?
So it's about 55 to 60 acres that were used, especially when that road goes past and then curves towards St. Augusta in that area. We were compensated as other people were compensated, and wow, this area needed the road. We needed the freeway. We just had to have it because, and in fact, the intersection that was there at the end of the road going past the prep school, that original entrance, it was becoming more and more dangerous to get on and off there and across the road and then et cetera. So, or if you're going west, it was problematic. So the interchange, in fact, has probably saved lives. Yeah. Please.
In terms of this, the starting of the monastic property here in the Arboretum, how did this all come about? The almost 3,000 acres, it's a big chunk of property to pull together at one time or over a time period. How did that happen?
So, in I want to say about 1863 or so, we had the community was able to purchase about 1,200 acres of land. And there's been across the years, Peggy Roski does a beautiful job of showing how, in fact, along the years, there was a lot of trading of pieces and parcels back and forth around the edges, okay? And then in the last 25 years, so we have purchased some land simply to if you will, protect the perimeter and the integrity of this as a rural area, and tried to work with the Avon Hills Project, if you will, to keep this area more rural rather than less rural, okay? But the Arboretum was really, John can comment on this, but from the monastic side of it, it was once the oak savanna had come into place, that was the time when Father Paul really pulled together a proposal to have it passed and brought to the monastic chapter and passed by the chapter, that the whole property would become an arboretum, and that focused for the university and the prep school in that specific area that's over there. But we do a lot of work now in the sugar bush, but we also wanted to maintain some sense of that there are other areas that are less simply peopled. That is just for the sake of wildlife, Okay, so it was really that originated out of Paul's getting some of those key pieces in place and then bringing forward a proposal. Does that, okay. Yes, please.
Just to set the record straight, I have done presentations about that, but it was based on what Tom Kroll did for the Sunday at the Abbey, which is online. You can find it in Digital Commons, and he did a really good job of slides. They acquired this piece, then they got this piece, then they sold that piece, you know, so it goes on point by point through the development of the Abbey's land. He did a great job.
Thanks so much, Peg. Thank you. I'm grateful for the clarification. I lost the piece, okay? You may see you've lost a lot more than that, John. Hey, thank you all. Thank you.
So just wanted to mention one last event that the Benedictine Institute is offering this academic year. We have Building Community, and it is going to be in the Abbey Community Room, also called the Sloggy, Friday morning with homemade monastic treats, hot chocolate, coffee. So if you have a few minutes to just pop by, or a few more minutes to hang out and visit and meet some of our coworkers, we'll be there from 9 to 10:45. So thank you for all coming. Thank you all for coming.